Hello everyone. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and let's go.
The door to our downtown Chicago loft always opened with the same heavy click. That sound used to be the sound of home, end of my shift, end of someone else's pain, the start of my life. Now, it was just the sound that meant I was alone again. 12 hours on my feet, 2 complex surgeries. I could still feel the ghostly chill of surgical gloves on my hands and the smell of antiseptic that felt like it was baked into my skin. I was dreaming of silence, a glass of whiskey, of just crashing on the couch and resting my head in Emily's lap. But there was no silence. From deep inside the apartment, a low, pulsing beat hammered the air. Music I hated. It was like a migraine turned into a soundtrack. I walked into the living room. Emily was standing in front of the massive, floor-to-ceiling mirror that took up most of the wall. She was in her war paint. Bright lipstick, eyes lined like she was heading into battle, not to a party. And she was wearing a dress. Black, silk, thin as a spider's web. It clung to her body so tightly, it looked like it had been painted on. This was not a dress for her husband. This was a dress for everyone else. She caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled.
"Oh, honey, you're home."
Her voice was bright, excited. She floated over to me, and the air filled with the scent of her perfume. A sweet, suffocating smell that overpowered even the hospital stench I carried with me. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek, leaving a sticky, sugary trace behind. "Long day," I said, kicking off my shoes. Every movement sent a dull ache through my back. Was thinking we could order a pizza, watch a movie.
"Oh, babe, I'm so sorry."
She put on a guilty face, but I could see the impatient little devils dancing in her eyes.
"It's the launch party for that new gallery. Everyone's going to be there. It's huge for the boutique, you know? Networking, clients. I won't be long, I promise."
I nodded. I always nodded. What else was I going to do? Lock her in? Start a fight? I was not that guy. I was good, reliable Ben. The rock, the anchor, the one she could always come back to. I watched her slip on a pair of impossibly high heels, watched her adjust the dress, watched her eyes burn with anticipation. That fire had not burned for me in a long time. I was not the fuel for it anymore. At best, I was just the convenient, warm parking spot where she could leave her car for the night.
"Do not wait up,"
she threw over her shoulder from the door.
"I'll be back in a flash."
The door slammed shut. That same heavy click again. The music was gone, and the silence that followed was deafening. I poured myself a whiskey, neat. I walked through our huge apartment. This was her world. The minimalism, the expensive designer furniture, the panoramic windows overlooking the city lights. It all screamed status, success, her. I just paid the bills here. I sat on the couch and turned on the TV with the sound off, just to have something flickering in front of my eyes. I was not jealous. No. Jealousy is a hot, fiery emotion. What I felt was something else. Cold, detached. Like me, the surgeon, looking at an X-ray and seeing a dark spot. Not knowing the exact diagnosis yet, but already knowing it was bad. Real bad. I do not know how long I sat there. An hour? 2? The whiskey in my glass was gone. I did not pour another. I just waited. She came back at 4 in the morning. I heard the key scratching at the lock. She could not get it in on the first try, then the soft click and the rustle of her dress in the hallway. I was in bed, my eyes closed, playing dead. My hearing went sharp, just like in the OR when I'm listening to the beep of a heart monitor. The soft thud of her heels hitting the floor. The whisper of silk as she pulled off the dress. the quiet creak of the closet door. She moved like a thief in her own home, and then I smelled it. That was the first symptom. The sharp, acrid smell of cigarette smoke tangled in her hair. Emily did not smoke. She hated cigarettes. She slipped into bed, trying to stay as far away from me as possible, right on the very edge. But I still smelled it. Symptom number 2. Cutting through the layer of her sweet perfume was another scent. Someone else's. A man's cologne. Something with sandalwood and musk. An expensive, confident scent. Not her husband's scent. I lay there, perfectly still. My heart beat steady and even. The surgeon in me had already made a preliminary diagnosis. All that was left was to collect the history and get confirmation. The next morning, I was up early. I made coffee. When she came into the kitchen, wrapped in a silk robe with smudged mascara under her eyes, she looked exhausted and hollowed out. "Morning," I said, my voice calm. "Morning," she croaked, pouring herself a glass of water. I took a sip of coffee, watching her over the rim of the mug. "How was the party? Land any new clients?" She flinched, but recovered instantly. A bright, enthusiastic mask slipped over her face. "Oh, it was amazing, just incredible. So many important people. I met the owner of that hotel chain. He wants me to design their new staff uniforms. We talked until almost dawn, just hashing out the concept." She was lying with flair, with detail, looking me straight in the eye. Too much detail. A patient trying to hide their symptoms is always too talkative. I listened silently, nodding. And then her phone, lying on the counter, buzzed. A message lit up the screen. She lunged for it like it was a live grenade. She snatched it, instinctively turning the screen away from me. But I was quicker. I saw the name. Olivia the designer. Olivia. Such a simple, pathetic cover. It was not even funny. It was insulting. She was playing me for a complete idiot. She typed a quick reply, a little smile playing on her lips. The kind of secret, anticipatory smile I had not seen directed at me in months. I finished my coffee. "Put the mug in the sink." "I've got to get to the hospital. I'm on call today," I said. "Okay, honey. Have a good one." I walked over to her and kissed the top of her head. Her hair still smelled of smoke and another man. She did not notice anything different in my behavior. For her, it was business as usual. But for me, everything had changed. At that moment, in our sun-drenched kitchen, our marriage was dead. I did not feel pain. I did not feel anger. I just felt a cold, calm resolve. The diagnosis was in. All that was left was to wait for the autopsy results. Fridays became her holy day, the day she made a sacrifice of our marriage at the altar of some cheap, neon god. The lies she spun grew more and more elaborate. They were not just simple get-togethers with friends anymore. Now, they were private couture shows, dinners with investors from Zurich, emergency meetings to launch a new ad campaign. She'd say these things with a breathless importance, like she was describing the moon landing. And I'd just listen and nod, mentally filing away every new detail of her fictional universe. Her wardrobe changed, too. The things she bought were different, shorter, tighter, with cutouts in places I did not even know you could have them. This was not the wardrobe of a surgeon's wife. This was the uniform of a huntress. Every Friday, when she walked out that door, she looked like a completely different person. Not my Emily. Some glossy, predatory doppelganger. I was not there for her meetings, but my mind, trained for years to see what's hidden inside the human body, started painting pictures. I could see it all with sickening clarity. His high-rise studio, with that panoramic view of Chicago, the city lights blurring behind them. His car, parked somewhere dark by the lake, the windows fogged up from the inside. The dirty back rooms of clubs where the bass vibrated through the floor, matching a rhythm of their own. I could picture her losing a kind of control she never lost with me, a wildness she saved only for him. She'd come home in the early morning, and the ritual of deception would continue. She'd slip quietly into the shower, trying to wash away the traces of another night. But she always missed something. A faint shimmer on her neck that was not her highlighter, the faint redness on her skin from beard burn. And that smell. The smell of smoke, alcohol, and his cologne that no amount of body wash could kill. She'd slide into our bed, and I could feel the chill of betrayal radiating off of her. My surgeon's brain could not switch off. It searched for symptoms, collected data, analyzed anomalies. I started noticing everything. The way she'd jump whenever I picked up her phone just to check the time. The way she'd step out onto the balcony to answer a text, even if it was pouring freezing rain. The way her fingers would tap nervously on the table if Olivia, the designer, took too long to write back. She was like a junkie waiting for a fix. And then I found it. The primary symptom. The tumor that could no longer be ignored. It was a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after it all started. She was asleep, and I was in the kitchen on my laptop paying bills online. I opened our joint credit card statement. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, all normal. And then I saw a line item that made the blood in my veins run cold. Hotel Indigo, Chicago downtown, 2:47 a.m. $350. The date was from the previous Friday. The Friday she was supposedly at a girls' dinner at that Italian place until 10. I stared at that line, and the world shrank to the size of my laptop screen. $350. 2:47 in the morning. A hotel. Not a restaurant. Not a bar. A hotel. This was not just proof. It was a slap in the face. A bold, cynical slap in the face, paid for with our money. I did not feel rage. I had no desire to wake her up, to shove the screen in her face. No. I felt the same thing I feel in the OR when a heart monitor flatlines. The simple acknowledgement of death. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a password-protected folder on my computer. I did not start a fight. I just silently continued to gather my evidence. Another week passed. I decided to make one last attempt, not to save our marriage, but to give her one last chance at a shred of honesty. I cooked her favorite pasta, opened a bottle of good wine. We sat at the table in almost complete silence. I looked at her. She was beautiful, even exhausted, but as I looked at her, I did not see my wife anymore. I just saw a woman, a stranger. "Emily," I started, my voice even as I set down my fork. "We're drifting apart. I can feel it. Is there someone else?" I asked the question point blank. No hints, no accusations, just the question. And she exploded. It was like something out of a movie. First, her eyes went wide with disbelief. Then they filled with tears, and then her face twisted into a mask of righteous fury. "How could you?" Her voice cracked as she shot up from her chair. "How dare you accuse me of that? I am working my ass off so we can live in this apartment, so we can have this life. I'm out there hustling, networking, bringing in money. And you? You come home from your job and you want me to just sit by your side like some lapdog. You cannot handle my success. You want to lock me in this house and ruin my career." She was performing, and it was a brilliant performance. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her hands were shaking. Any other guy would have been on his knees, begging for forgiveness, but I just looked at her and felt nothing. No pain, no guilt. Just a cold, absolute certainty that I was looking at a liar. A pathological, masterful liar. I watched her sob, and only one thought echoed in my head. Diagnosis confirmed. I slowly stood up. "Okay, Emily. I'm sorry I asked." I backed down. I let her think she'd won, that she'd convinced me. But in my mind, it was over. I just needed one final, undeniable piece of proof. Something I could see with my own eyes. And I waited. The next Friday, she left for the most important meeting of the year. She was wearing a red dress that left nothing to the imagination. She kissed me goodbye, and her lips felt cold. I did not turn on the TV. I did not pour a whiskey. I just lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I did not feel like a victim. I had no pity for myself. I felt like an investigator who had set all the traps and was now just waiting for his target to walk into one. I was calm. I was ready. The clock on the nightstand read 12:30 a.m. And in that moment, the silence was shattered by the sharp, piercing ring of my phone. I grabbed it instantly. It was the hospital. I answered. The voice on the other end was tense and fast. It was the head nurse from the ER. "Dr. Evans, we need you, now. There's been a multi-car pileup on the freeway. We have multiple criticals. We need all hands on deck immediately." In a single second, everything changed. Thoughts of Emily, the cheating, the lies, it all vanished. It shrank into a tiny, insignificant speck. There's work to do. There are people bleeding out. There are lives to save. I was already on my feet, pulling on my jeans as I yelled into the phone, "I'll be there in 15 minutes!" I was flying down the highway, the city just a blur of lights. Rain hammered the windshield, and the wipers could barely keep up. There was not a single stray thought in my head, just a cold, clear algorithm. Assess the situation, prep the OR, assemble the team. My old Ford was screaming as I pushed it to its limit. Personal problems? Emotions? All of that was back in the empty apartment. Right now, I was not a husband. I was a surgeon, a machine for saving lives. I cut off the highway onto one of the main streets, taking a shortcut to the hospital, the club district. Even at this hour, it was alive with its own feverish, fake life. Drunk crowds, neon signs reflecting in the wet puddles on the asphalt. And then, in the sweep of my headlights, I saw it. Emily's white Maserati. It was parked right at the entrance to a club called Aura. Spotless, predatory, arrogant, just like its owner. It was parked so brazenly it was blocking half the sidewalk. There was no doubt it was her car. In that moment, the puzzle in my head clicked into place. The final, missing piece fell with a dull thud. There were no investors from Zurich, no private shows, just this club and him. I did not slow down. I did not feel a single pang of pain in my chest. Not a muscle in my face twitched. I just processed the information, like a nurse handing me a patient's chart. Hemoglobin is critical. My wife is a whore. Noted. I just kept driving. First, the job. The OR greeted me with blinding light and the smell of blood. Here, I was home. Here, everything was real. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the most honest music in the world. The team was already waiting for me, ready for battle. On the table was a kid, maybe 20 years old. His body was a wreck of bone and flesh. Internal bleeding, multiple fractures, a ruptured spleen. He was circling the drain. In here, in this sterile world, I was not a cheated husband. In here, I was a god. I took the scalpel in my hand, and the world outside this room ceased to exist. My hands moved fast, precise, confident. Every motion was honed by thousands of hours of practice. I gave orders, and the nurses followed them without question. I cut, I sutured, I removed, I put organs back where they belonged. I held his heart in my hands, willing it to beat again. This was my world. A world where your actions determine if someone lives or dies, where there's no room for lies or half-truths. You either save them or you lose them. It's life or death. 6 hours. For 6 hours I was on my feet, feeling no fatigue. For 6 hours I fought a war with death, and I won. When I tied the last suture, the monitor showed stable, steady vitals. The kid was going to live. I walked out of the OR, peeling off my bloody gloves. The adrenaline faded, leaving a hollow emptiness and a bone-deep exhaustion in its place. And in that emptiness, a moment of absolute, ice-cold clarity. I had just done something important, something real. I had saved a man's life. And while I was doing that, my wife was trading our life for a cheap dopamine hit in a neon haze. The anger I had suppressed for so long did not explode. It just burned out, like a fuse reaching the end. And in its place was only ice. A cold, quiet, steel-hard resolve. I did not drive home. I turned the car around and drove back to that same district. The city was waking up, a gray, miserable morning. I pulled up to the club. Aura. The music was dead. Garbage cans stood by the entrance where tired janitors were smoking. I got out of the car. I was still in my scrubs, smelling of antiseptic and someone else's blood. I pushed the heavy door open and walked inside. The smell was disgusting. A mix of spilled liquor, sweat, cheap perfume, and desperation. I walked across the empty dance floor, my shoes sticking to the floor. From the VIP section, roped off with a velvet cord, I could hear a quiet laugh. I unhooked the rope and stepped inside. And I saw them. They were on a large leather couch. Her shoes were kicked off on the floor. She was sitting on his lap, her arms wrapped around his neck. They were kissing. Slow, sloppy, lazy. Like two people who owned the world and had absolutely nothing to lose. I did not sneak up. I walked right over and stopped at the table cluttered with empty glasses. They were so wrapped up in each other, they did not notice a thing. I just stood there and watched. For a few seconds. For an eternity. Finally, she opened her eyes, and she saw me. Her face, I will never forget that look. It was not just fear. It was pure animal terror. A mix of shock, panic, and the sudden, crushing realization of total ruin. "Ben? How did you—" she stammered, trying to scramble off his lap. Her lover, the DJ, finally noticed me too. He jumped to his feet, trying to stand between us. His eyes were a mix of confusion and drunken aggression. "Hey, man, beat it. You're interrupting something," he snarled. I did not even look at him. My eyes were locked on her. And then I made one sharp, calculated move. It was not a punch. I just shoved him aside. Not with brute force, but with surgical efficiency, breaking their connection. He stumbled back onto the couch, surprised less by the force and more by my absolute calm. I took a step toward him. He instinctively shrank back into the cushions. "Get your hands off her!" My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it was lined with steel. He froze. And then I paused. I let my eyes drift over to Emily. I scanned her from head to toe, her wrinkled dress, her smeared lipstick, her terrified eyes. I looked at her like she was a damaged piece of goods. like a biological specimen under a microscope. Then I turned back to him. "Actually, do not bother," I said, just as quietly. "You can have her. I'm done with her." My words hung in the stale air of the club. They were quiet, but they landed louder than any scream. Emily stared at me, her mouth hanging open, but no sound came out. She still did not get it. She was expecting a scene. Shouting, accusations, maybe even a fight. She was waiting for the drama she loved so much, but I was not going to give it to her. I finally looked directly at her, not at the woman I once loved, but at a complete stranger. There was no pain in my eyes, no jealousy, just a cold, detached contempt. The kind of feeling you get when you see something dirty, something you just need to remove from your life. "I just spent 6 hours putting a man back together," I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. I held his heart in my hands. I stitched his arteries. I fought for him, and you were here. I was not saying it as an accusation. I was just stating a fact. Comparing two parallel realities, mine, where life was on the line, and hers, where the only thing at stake was a cheap thrill. I unbuckled the strap of the expensive watch she'd given me for our last anniversary. A Swiss timepiece with an engraving, "Yours forever, Ben." I smirked to myself. I slid it off my wrist and casually tossed it onto the sticky table in front of her. It landed with a clatter next to an empty champagne flute. "Fake," I said, looking at the watch, but I was not talking about the watch. She flinched like she'd been slapped, her eyes filled with tears. Here we go. The performance was about to start. But I did not even give her an opening line. I pulled the smooth platinum wedding band from my finger. Over the years, it had become a part of my hand. Now it felt like a foreign object, a cold piece of metal. I did not place it down gently. I just threw it on the table. It hit the glass with a sharp ping, bounced, and rolled right off the edge, coming to a stop on the dirty floor at her feet. Her eyes darted from the ring back to my face. A flicker of panic. Real panic. She was starting to understand that this was not a game. "Ben, please. I can explain. It's not what you think." Her voice trembled and broke. I let out a cold, joyless laugh. "Explain? Do not bother. I'm not interested." I turned my back on her. I took a step toward the exit. "Leave the keys to the house on the table," I threw over my shoulder, not looking back. "Your things will be at your boutique tomorrow morning. My lawyer will be calling yours." Those were the last words I ever said to her. "Ben, do not go! Wait!" she screamed at my back, her voice filled with desperation. I did not turn around. I walked through the empty, filthy room, and every step was solid and sure. My back was straight as a steel rod. I did not hear her sobbing. I did not hear her lover mumbling something, trying to comfort her. I was already in another world, a world where she no longer existed. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped outside. The gray, damp dawn greeted me with the smell of wet asphalt. I took a deep breath. The air was clean. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away without a single glance in the rearview mirror. For me, it was over. But for her, it was just beginning. She was left there in the dim light of the VIP section, among the empty glasses and sticky tables. The DJ tried to hug her, to say something, but she shoved him away. She just stared at the ring lying on the dirty floor at her feet. At the far end of the room, a janitor flipped a switch. The bright neon Aura sign outside the window went dark. The club was plunged into a dull gray gloom. And in that moment, the full scale of the disaster hit her. She had traded the rock her house was built on for a pile of sand. She had traded a real life for a cheap, glittering illusion. The music had stopped. The lights went out. Her endless party was finally over. The divorce was fast and quiet. I hired the best lawyer in Chicago. Emily tried to fight it, demanding half of everything, screaming about emotional abuse. But my lawyer simply presented the court with the credit card statement from the Hotel Indigo and a few photos of her white Maserati parked outside the Aura Club at 3 a.m. every Friday. The judge got the picture. She did not get a single cent more than what was spelled out in our prenup. Our loft was sold. I took my half and moved into a smaller apartment closer to the hospital. Her boutique, cut off from my investments, started to hemorrhage money. The DJ, Oliver, vanished from her life 2 weeks after the divorce was final. Turns out, he was interested in a fun, rich mistress, not a divorced woman with money problems. I threw myself into my work. I was made head of cardiothoracic surgery. My life became simple, clean. Work, the gym, a few beers with friends. I slept soundly. I no longer woke up in the middle of the night to listen to her breathing and wonder where she'd been. One day, I ran into her at the grocery store. The change was shocking. Her eyes were empty, her clothes were cheap, her hair was a mess. She saw me, opened her mouth to say something, but I just gave her a slight nod and kept pushing my cart. We were strangers. 2 years passed. I met a woman. Her name is Anna, an anesthesiologist at my hospital. She's calm, smart, and honest. We got married 6 months ago. Our life is not a party. It's a quiet harbor. Emily, from what I hear, finally lost the boutique and left Chicago. Someone told me she's working as a receptionist at a fitness club in the suburbs. Her party did not just end. It ended in a complete and total defeat. Sometimes, when I come home after a long shift, I open the door to my apartment and I hear the silence. But it's not the heavy, suffocating silence from before. It's a silence filled with peace. And I realize that sometimes, to finally be able to breathe, you just have to cut the tumor out of your life. No regrets. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, do not forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.